I do first want to make sure that we've got folks here and see if we have a motion on our minutes. And I do want to, and I know Rose made a couple of small updates around typos to make sure everyone's name was spelled correctly. So just want to name that too on our minutes. So do I have anyone who wants to make a motion around the minutes?
Good morning. This is Greg Clauser. I can make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Do I have a second?
I'll second. This is Andy.
Thank you, Andy. All right. So I do know that Jeremy, our vice chair, Jeremy Vandehay, is going to be here at 10. So I know he's not here. He let me know he had a conflicting meeting. So let's start with Kimberly Hendricks on the minutes.
Approved as written.
Thanks, Kimberly. Dawn, are you here?
Yes, ma'am. Approved.
Great, thank you. Kate Nass? I know Kate had to be in and out for presentations this morning as well, so I think she's not with us at the moment. Sean Parkman?
Approved.
Okay, great. So with Kimberly and Andy, along with, Greg and Andy, sorry, along with Kimberly, Dawn, and Sean, we have our minutes approved. Thank you all. And so we are actually going to move to the Hero Scorecard. We have Teresa, Stephen, and Amber presenting for us this morning. So am I handing it over to you, Teresa?
Yes, thank you, Siobhan. I'll get us started, and then my co-presenters, Dr. Neldner and Amber Robson from Kaiser, will all split up the slides. So good morning, board. I'm Teresa Cross, Pebb OAB Wellness Manager, and I'm here to present to you the results of Pebb's scorecard, which was conducted last fall. So let's see, let's get started. HERO, first of all, is an acronym for Health Education Research Organization. The HERO Health and Wellbeing Best Practices Scorecard is designed to help organizations learn about best practices for promoting workplace health and well-being, and to discover opportunities to improve and measure progress over time. HERO defines health and well-being initiatives as a set of organized activities and systematic interventions sponsored by employers and governmental and community agencies with the goal of educating employees and their dependents about their health, increasing their awareness of modifiable health risks, and promoting and supporting positive changes in their health behavior. Developed in consultation with leading authorities on population health and well-being, this tool provides us with an assessment of how our programs stack up to others in the National Scorecard database. Pebb has completed several scorecards over the years, most recently in 2019. A new updated version of the scorecard was introduced in 2021, and because the scorecard instrument changed significantly, we can't make comparisons to our results from 2019. However, at the end of the presentation, I'll share a few observations that compare themes that were similar to Pebb's responses between earlier versions and the current version of the scorecard. The scorecard was completed using guidance from HERO, which recognized that many employers may have closed their offices due to COVID, and that was true for the state. We responded to the questions based on when those temporary closures would end. And we also based our responses on the current plan year, which was 2021 last fall when we conducted the scorecard. Before I turn it over to Dr. Neldner, I'll just briefly explain the process that we use to complete the scorecard. HERO recommends getting input from several different individuals in order to complete it accurately. The people who participated in Pebb's scorecard process included members of the Worksite Wellness Coordinating Council, the Pebb board, Pebb leadership, and a large state agency. Everyone was convened over Teams, and Amber introduced the scorecard and asked the questions. clarified the questions when needed, and then the group discussed and agreed on the responses. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Neldner. And do I need to queue up when to move the slides forward? Is that Rose who does that?
Somebody needs to say next slide. I don't care if it's you or the person doing the presenting.
Okay, well, I'm done with the first slide and we can go to the next one for Dr. Neldner. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Good morning, board members and guests. And that was a great introduction to the HERO Scorecard. I will just mention that the HERO Scorecard is a collaboration between HERO, that non-for-profit organization, and Mercer. And we have been in this relationship for 13 years already around the scorecard. I'm a co-author of the different versions of the scorecard since 2009, and delighted that we're able to put our effort behind this database and this scorecard for best practices that will help all organizations identify their opportunities and strengths relative to best practices. So I wanted to start with some research information. We've done a number of studies on the HERO Scorecard database over the years, but you can see the headline. The headline really is what we've found, and what we continue to find in study after study is that the more well-being best practices that an organization has in place, the more likely they'll have better results and optimal results in terms of reduced medical cost, better employee health, deeper engagement with the organization through employees perceiving that their organization cares about their health and well-being. And in the graph on the right, you can also see that we even did a stock market study. I know that the state isn't a publicly traded organization, but the concept is that when we put together this portfolio of publicly traded companies that scored high on the HERO Scorecard, and by scoring high, we meant 75th percentile or above, compared to low scorers on the scorecard, we found that high-scoring organizations performed better in the stock market relative to the Standard & Poor's 500. About 76% higher appreciation over 6 years for those high-scoring HERO Scorecard score organizations. And the graph on the left shows a study that we did at the very beginning of a new version of the scorecard, when we did a retrospective study of organizations who scored high and those who scored low on the scorecard, and looked at their healthcare cost data for 3 years. And you can see over the course of 3 years, and granted, this is a few years ago, and you can see that the cost of healthcare has risen dramatically. That's another big takeaway here. But those organizations that had more best practices in place had lower cost appreciation and even a negative medical cost trend. And we, of course, know that's important to the state of Oregon and your mandate to keep your costs in check over the course of time. So having best practices around well-being and helping your members be as healthy as they can be is definitely a positive for not only managing the cost of care, but clearly we look at a broader picture of the value on investment and how people are more engaged with their work, more engaged with the organization, more in touch with their individual purpose and the organizational purpose, and just higher performing overall. I'll move forward, please, to the next slide. Yes,
Dr. Neldner, I just wanted to interject. I've really appreciated when we've had that, I think it's a triangle that's been shared with us, like the 3 important stools that are part of having really strong health benefits, and this is one of those components. And I was just curious in all the research, those other pieces, just in terms of having affordable benefits and preventative care and communications around that. Was that part of the analysis too when looking at the HERO scorecard? Because, you know, those also important components.
You're right. Very, very important. Communication is extremely important. And as a matter of fact, in just a couple of slides, I'm going to share some of the very best practices that were included and that were most associated with best outcomes. So you're absolutely right. Organization and leadership support, you'll see we mentioned that and reinforced that a number of times, which includes good communication, socialization, so people know what's there for them and how they can get involved. Those are just crucial elements to having the best possible outcomes for your well-being initiative. So just a little history here of the scorecard. Teresa already mentioned some of this earlier on, but initially a group of subject matter experts did the very initial HERO scorecard in 2006. As I mentioned earlier, in 2009, Mercer became involved, and we co-authored a updated version of the scorecard and also put that online as an online electronic questionnaire. And then in subsequent years, in 2014 and again in 2021, the scorecard was revised based upon more evidence, more best practices that were identified, and also reviewing the research around the scorecard database that I shared with you earlier. And to date, we've had over 2,500 organizations complete the scorecard since that 2009 launch of the online version. So well adapted. It's withstood the test of time so far. We really find that organizations can use this information. We're going to talk more about the strengths and opportunities that you have based upon completing the scorecard. But just, and Teresa, I hope I'm not stealing your fire, but we hope to use the results of the HERO scorecard information for the strategic planning process that we have on the roadmap. So Teresa will say more about that later. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the scorecard. It's broken down into 6 different domains, as you can see, and there are different point allocations allotted to each of those areas. There's a total of 200 points possible, and you can see how they're distributed here among strategic planning, organizational and cultural support, programs, program integration, participation strategies, and measurement and evaluation. And I'll make note of the fact that that this version of the scorecard, version 5, has had a reshuffling of points. We reallocated total section points to some degree, took some away from programs, and moved more toward organizational and cultural support. And you'll see in the subsequent slides where we show some more research evidence that organizational support and strategic planning are really key drivers of best outcomes. So point allocations are a little bit different than they were. The other thing I want to mention about this latest version, V5 of the scorecard, is that we also intentionally provided greater focus on mental health, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and social determinants of health. So we know those are very important to organizations today, and we added additional questions and created out some questions that weren't as predictive in the past to better focus on those areas. And the fourth area that we enhanced is employees' perception of their organization supporting them in their health and well-being. So I'll move on to the next slide, please. So here is some of the results of a study we conducted just a couple of years ago and published 2 papers from that study. And this particular factor analysis attempted to identify those best practices that were most associated with the outcomes of lower healthcare costs associated with improved health and participation in certain activities. The incentives were associated with participating in a health assessment and biometric screening. And the fourth was, as I mentioned previously, employees' perception that their organization cares about their health and well-being. And I like to call this the best of the best practices slide. You can see that of all of those best practices included in the scorecard, organizational and leadership support was by far associated with all of those 4 outcomes that I mentioned. And incentives, again, more narrowly focused, but other high associations were for having comprehensive programs, covering the needs of the whole organization and the population, as well as program integration, meaning that people are able to have their needs identified for them in many cases, and that your various partners are making appropriate referrals and connections for people so that they don't have to think that much about it, so that they can get the help that they need when it's appropriate. The next slide is another infographic from the same study, but slightly different analysis that broke down even further the 10 subset or the 10 best practices within organizational leadership support that contributed to those outcomes that I just described and that are repeated at the top of the slide there. So you can see that there are a variety of best practices contributing the different percentages. That's the variance that they accounted for toward those outcomes. Bottom line, though, just going back to that headline, the more best practices that the organization has in place, the more likely you'll be able to achieve those top outcomes that we just outlined. And again, if there are any questions along the way, I'm happy to entertain those as we go along, or we could have, we'll have some time at the end to address those as well. But if not, I will move forward to the next slide, please. So I always like to share this caution that while 200 points is the maximum available, we've never intended that any organization achieves 200 points. We don't think it's likely that anyone will. We certainly don't recommend that every best practice is right for every organization. And some best practices just don't make sense for an organization for a variety of reasons. The size of the organization, how many locations they have, the makeup of the job functions, things like that. And just for example, for some specific examples for the state of Oregon, you know, may not make sense for you to make the offerings available to all of your retirees. May not make sense to have an on-site clinic at every one of your sites. It may not make sense to retrofit every single building in the next year to meet well building standards. While all of those can be best practices and are best practices for some organizations, they may not be the best fit at this particular time for every organization. And again, as I alluded to in previous slides, the more evidence that we have that supports a particular best practices, the higher weighting there is in the scoring. So for the most part, all of these best practices included in the scorecard are evidence-based. Some have stronger evidence than others. And the next slide, please. So this is just a high-level review of where you stand relative to the benchmark at the time. So this is a, excuse me, a dispersion or distribution of the various organizations that have completed the scorecard since version 5 was launched in 2021. And you can see that Pebb score of 113 is in the top half of all of the scores. And just for reference, 127 points was the beginning of the 75th percentile, or the point of the 75th percentile. And that's what we consider high scoring, at 75th percentile or above. And we certainly know that you're well on your way with a score of 113. You've got lots of best practices in place. And we're also going to talk about some of the opportunities. But as I said earlier, we are going to use this information to infuse it into the strategic planning process that you've heard about and that we'll undertake in coming months. And we look forward to seeing even higher scores in the future. So with that, one more slide for me. I'm going to just show you your raw scores by section compared to several benchmarks. We use the greater than 5,000 employees benchmark to compare Pebb to. And the final column, of course, has maximum possible points in each of those 6 sections. You can see that there's really no organization that's getting near some of the top point values, particularly in strategic planning and organizational support. And there's opportunity for many organizations, most organizations, in fact, to do more in those particular areas. Again, organization and cultural support being the #1 best practice, having everybody in your organization, from your leadership, which we know is committed to this well-being initiative, to having people on the ground. You know, you have your different agencies having their wellness plans that will contribute to organizational support, and having supervisors, managers being aware of the benefits of having their work team participate in well-being and be at their optimal health and well-being. If there are any questions, I'll entertain those. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Amber to talk more about your strengths and opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, so now that we know Pebb scores and how you compare to other large employees of more than 5,000 employees, let's review what Pebb scores mean in terms of strengths and opportunities. So according to the scorecard, and again, this was alluded to earlier in the presentation, but there are many practices that Pebb could implement. And when Mercer analyzed Pebb scores and looked more specifically at how the scores were derived, this is how they determined the opportunities that Pebb should consider. So first, we'll look at practices that Pebb is not currently implementing or ones that Pebb is partially implementing. So in other words, how can Pebb strengthen what you are already doing? Second, we'll identify practices that the government and or public sector companies have implemented. And this was previously noted, but another thing to note is not all practices are necessarily relevant or feasible for public sector employees such as Pebb. Some of those practices or examples include on-site health clinics, achieving specific health targets for incentives, meeting well business or building standards such as LEED certification. The state may or may not be inclined to seek LEED certification on new building construction or when remodeling existing buildings. And third, rather than recommending several practices that have small point values, Mercer identified fewer practices with higher point values, essentially when implementing, they'll have a higher impact on the scorecard results. So example, things like the strategic initiatives and organizational culture support. Okay, next slide. So what we went ahead and did is pulled together the key recommendations from HERO that were identified through the scorecard responses. So the first thing being continuing to use the scorecard and identify areas for improvement and opportunities, as well as measuring growth. Secondly, Pebb should focus on big picture issues such as strategic planning and the organizational culture as previously mentioned. And we'll see in the slides, Pebb is already engaging in several best practices and should continue to do so. Third, having a written multi-year strategy and tactical roadmap to help execute Pebb's strategy is a big part of the strategic planning and identified as number 2. And fourth, getting input from stakeholders, which include PMAC and the Worksite Wellness Coordinating Council, are important and will serve to both assure the plan addresses the challenges and the potential solutions, as well as contribute to galvanizing organizational culture and support identified in number 2. And next slide. And I think Teresa will be taking this slide. Oh no, I think I am. My apologies. Oh no, wait, I think Teresa, it is you.
Okay. So let me pull up my notes here. The opportunities here offer more detail about key recommendations from the earlier slide. The first bullet on the left, Pebb has embarked on implementing a strategic plan, or excuse me, on the right, Pebb has embarked on implementing a strategic plan and a tactical roadmap. PMAC and the Worksite Wellness Coordinating Council began that work on the plan late last year after the scorecard was administered. So it wasn't captured. So it was considered an opportunity when the scorecard results were analyzed. The board will hear more about these efforts at their July meeting. The second bullet, connect agency level organization goals. This refers to agency-specific wellness plans. Ideally, the overarching well-being strategic plan I mentioned will provide that strategic direction that agencies can use to align their own individual wellness plans with. And the third bullet, unions are important stakeholders in Pebb's effort to address and improve member health. Unions are represented on both PMAC and the Worksite Wellness Coordinating Council, and we will continue to engage with them to help inform our mutual priorities. Next slide, please. So,
okay, I think I'm back on now.
Okay, go for it, Amber.
Teresa and I are going back and forth, so you'll get a little bit of a different dynamic. Okay, so from the organizational and culture support section of the scorecard, Pebb's strengths include the structures put in place through the executive order on state agency employee wellness, such as agency wellness plans and the Worksite Wellness Coordinating Council. And just one thing to notate really quick, the box in the green are the things that Pebb have already identified as strengths in areas of work that are already in motion, and then the yellow box is the opportunities. So under this category, the opportunities are identified with the first bullet being to board's approval of the PMAC recommendation that larger agencies have a full-time wellness manager, which you'll hear an update about this later on in the board meeting. And the second bullet is to address increasing leadership engagement within programs and modeling work-life balance. There are many ways to help agency leaders to be engaged. Guidance on agency wellness plans outlined several actions that managers and leaders can take to show support for wellness. And agencies were asked to include some of those strategies in their 2-year wellness plans. And the third bullet addresses reviewing policies and procedures to include support of mental health and well-being. Since the scorecard was completed, PMAC and the council have engaged with carriers like Canopy and a representative of an employee resource group to better understand the issues members are seeking for care or in dealing with when they're seeking for care, the needs members have for mental health support, and the possible mechanisms to expand EAP services to agencies and individuals, and how to make it easier for agencies to contract directly with EAP. And next slide.
And Amber, I just want to check the numbers on the bottom, the bar. Is that the first number where we are now? Or what can you just explain the numbers, like on this one, 17, 15, 20?
Yes, great question. So this was the recap of the slide Dr. Noldner used, where it showed Pebb scores, where they or the scores to employer organizations of over 5,000 employees, and then the possible points. So we just continued to take those sections and apply them to each slide, so you can see where Pebb got their score, the comparison, and then the total points possible.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, so this slide refers to programs, and currently Pebb offers a robust set of benefits and well-being programs, which are regularly reviewed with an eye toward improving utilization, relevancy, and changing promotional materials in a variety of methods aimed at our broad membership. And the opportunities identified from the scorecard was to expand Pebb's well-being program offerings to include employee, career, and personal growth needs. This is important if you think about wellness or well-being as more than just physical and emotional or mental health. Job satisfaction and engagement with one's work are important contributors to a sense of well-being. And this connects to the next opportunity, which is to take a holistic view and approach to support employee well-being to address these other elements like physical, emotional, social, and financial. And this can be done by inventorying Pebb's current offerings and identifying where program offerings can be expanded to address these other dimensions of well-being. And next slide, which I believe Teresa will cover.
Program integration. So on the left, of course, is the green box saying what we're already doing or our strength, which is evaluating our carrier and vendor handout policies and opportunities for enhancement. Pebb regularly does that. The first bullet on the right-hand side in the orange box, this speaks to the work PMAC has engaged in for the past few years and their recommendation that Pebb use one consolidated wellness portal or platform to include all well-being offerings. This will be included in Pebb's RFP schedule prioritization process over the next 3 to 5 years. The second bullet, these are other ways to measure health and well-being, is to include safety and disability data into existing programs. It's a best practice to use all available data sources to identify individuals with needs that could be connected to services. And the third bullet, to further integrate programs, Pebb could consider developing formal referral procedures and process flows between carriers and vendors. For example, if someone is out on a disability leave related to a workplace injury, they can be connected to mental health support, ergonomic assessment of their workstation or their work environment, lifestyle coaching to support exercise and nutrition needs, and a phased-in return to work opportunities. Those are just some examples of kind of combining and wraparound services, making sure all of the programs and providers are talking to one another to give that employee the full benefit of everything that they have available to them. Next slide. Participation strategies. This is something Pebb staff continuously work on. Pebb's attention to the health engagement model will continue. And again, Pebb's broad array of programs and multiple promotion strategies is a strength. Pebb will continue to monitor engagement and look for ways to increase it. On the right-hand side, Pebb's opportunities lie in paying attention to who isn't using their benefits and why. Health equity is priority 1 for Oregon Health Authority and for Pebb. And Pebb is engaging in several efforts to address health equity, including using a screening tool to look at programs, policies, and proposed benefit changes through the experience of our diverse members. Second bullet, we recognize that the new hybrid work arrangement is here to stay, and with it comes the opportunity to adapt our promotions and communications to employees who are not working in the traditional office setting. And thirdly, engaging managers into the wellness conversation is another way we can help more employees participate in our programs. A formal statistical analysis on data collected from organizations that completed version 4 of the HERO Scorecard, and Dr. Neldner mentioned this earlier, found that organizational and leadership support was identified as the practice most predictive of workplace well-being outcomes. Next slide, please. Do you want me to keep on going, Amber, or is this you?
Either one. I can take this one and you can close it out. So this slide is around measurement and evaluation, and it's the last of the categories within the scorecard. So Pebb regularly monitors physical health risk data, healthcare utilization, and cost data, as well as program participation. And areas where there are opportunities to strengthen this is to develop a plan to share the information with stakeholders such as the Pebb advisory groups. And secondly, setting goals for identified metrics to improve and having a timeline and process to evaluate the progress toward meeting the goals, and taking it even one step further and putting it all together in one place and/or dashboard to show everything is connected and telling the cohesive story of how Pebb is doing to improve health outcomes among its members.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is a slide you saw earlier, just to summarize the key recommendations that came out of our participation in the scorecard, was to continue using the scorecard to identify those areas that are relevant and feasible for improvement, and to repeat it in the future to identify those opportunities for growth, to focus on our strategic planning and organizational culture support, to develop a written multi-year strategy and tactical roadmap to execute that strategy, and then to vet the plan with our stakeholders to make sure that we are identifying challenges and potential solutions. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier on that we can't really do a comparison between our 2019 and 2021 scorecard. However, here are some comparison between questions that were on both of the scorecard and how Pebb answered those. The first bullet talks about technological advances and the demands of the pandemic, which brought additional methods to deliver programming that weren't available in 2019. So we had more features because of necessity to deliver programs and information technologically. The second bullet, the perception of those who answered the scorecard questions in 2021 was that programs were more effective than they were in 2019. Hard to identify why. It was a different group of folks who filled out the 2019 scorecard compared to the 21 scorecard. And that third bullet there, safety is more integrated into health and well-being programs compared to 2019. This may be related to agencies adding wellness responsibilities to their existing safety manager roles, Some members of the Worksite Wellness Coordinating Council are agency safety managers or involved in risk management somehow. And because some agency wellness plans are including safety activities and goals in that plan, it appeared that the notions of safety and well-being were more integrated now than they were before. Are there any questions?
All right. Well, thank you, Teresa and Amber and Dr. Neldner. And I know we're going to continue the wellness discussion with our next report too with Teresa again. And so folks have questions on the HERO scorecard that come up a little later when we talk about this, that would be fine. Oh, it looks like Dawn has a question. Go ahead, Dawn. Dawn, you're on mute.
How about now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Sorry, if we are going to continue to talk about the HERO scorecard strategic plan, then I can defer my question. It is about what proportion of employees are reporting using and benefiting from these different programs, and whether those have been segmented, and so which proportions, which parts of our employee populations are benefiting potentially more or less than others, and how we can target those who aren't. But again, that can be deferred until later if appropriate.
So in today's presentation, we weren't going to do a deep dive into that strategic plan and that tactical roadmap that we mentioned. I think we're on the board agenda for June or July to present on that and do a deeper dive. But to your second question, Dawn, about are we looking at who's using the programs and where there are programs that aren't getting high usage? Was that what you were talking about? Is Pebb looking at that? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we do. Pebb regularly looks at utilization and we get reports from our vendors and carriers. I don't believe that we're getting such discrete usage reports to show perhaps which agencies and employees of which agencies are using more or versus less, fewer services. And we are aware that, for instance, Canopy, our EAP, the utilization is around 9% usually. I'm not sure when EAP is going to be presenting to the board, which is very typical of EAPs across the country, even though the number doesn't seem very high. But we are talking to members of the employee resource groups. And oh, there we go. Canopy's presenting later today, so you're going to hear about that. Thank you. But we being my colleague Brian, myself, the coordinating council, and PMAC, we are engaged in conversations with members of the employee resource groups. These are members of the priority population, as well as conversations with colleagues in the Office of Equity and Inclusion, who are helping us understand a little more about where those places are specifically workplaces where the usage of programs and services might be lower, and helping us understand why.
Thanks, Teresa. And Ali, did you want to weigh in here too?
Yeah, just a brief comment. And really just a reminder to the board that you did approve some wellness investment funds at the last meeting as part of that funding assessment. So as we hear, about some of these wellness opportunities, probably more in that July, August timeframe when we bring a long-term and strategic plan to you. But, investment is always something that Pebb has looked to do, and we're really keeping a close eye on that risk score profile coming out of the pandemic. And we know we've got a big challenge ahead of us. So whatever thoughts or ideas you have, feel free to share them.
Thanks, Holly. Any other questions before we move to the agency wellness update?
That was great. Thank you. Especially addressing the equity considerations within that broader question. Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Teresa.
Thank you. So this next report is an update on the actions that were taken to implement the PMAC recommendation, which the board approved in late 2020, that larger agencies dedicate resources, FTE, toward a wellness manager position. So the first page of this report provides the background for the members of the board who weren't members back in 2020 about this recommendation. So moving on down the page, the actions that were taken first to implement this recommendation was to get a sense of which agencies already had wellness manager FTE. A survey was developed by Pebb staff and sent to HR managers at the 15 largest agencies, meaning those that had 500 or more employees. These are the questions that we asked. Was there any existing FTE? What the title and job classification of that position or positions was, whether they were part of the agency's management team. If the agency didn't have any FTE dedicated, was there the possibility of combining part-time positions to create one permanent full-time position dedicated to worksite and employee wellness? What barriers there were to dedicating FTE, and if the agency would like any assistance on wellness or the recommendation. These are the list then of the 15 agencies who received the survey, the HR managers at these agencies. We didn't receive very many responses to the survey, but of those we did, these agencies indicated that budget constraints was a barrier to dedicating FTE to the wellness manager position. So we then decided to, if you want to go on to the next page of the report here, we conferred with the governor's office and we conferred internally to decide, okay, what is our next step here? We decided that agencies could benefit from having information about what the benefits of a wellness manager position placed within the agency were, what is seen at the Department of Corrections that at the time did have a half-time wellness manager position, and what kind of accomplishments they were able to achieve as a result of having dedicated FTE. And it was also further determined that the best time to give agencies this information would be when they were putting their budgets together for the next biennium, since that was the barrier that they primarily indicated to having any FTE dedicated to wellness. So we put together a document that's also part of this packet here that was aimed at helping the decision makers at these agencies request funding for that wellness manager position for the next biennium. The document was sent in mid-April to HR managers at the agencies listed above, and then in early May, we followed up again by sending the document and inquiring about agencies' plans to request funding. We did hear back from 3 agencies. 2 reported that their leadership teams were in active conversations about FTE for wellness. And a 3rd reported that they wouldn't be asking for wellness manager funding, but they were going to continue with their current structure, which was described there. Again, those are the best practices, that they have an active wellness committee, that they have an executive sponsor. And this is an agency that has a good, solid wellness plan, and they have a funding for their wellness committee activities. So those are all good things to have in place. And just to let the board know that we will continue offering assistance to agencies on evidence-based wellness, to implementing the elements of the executive order, and to helping answer questions and support any decisions that they have some dedicated wellness manager FTE in place. And then on the last page of the document, if you want to move to the next slide, please, this is the document that was sent to HR managers describing the benefits of having a wellness FTE and what is in place at the Department of Corrections as a result of having a half-time wellness position, which will become full-time this year if it hasn't already.
So Teresa, I'm curious whether there are ongoing efforts to get the agencies to be responsive to the survey, because it sounds like you didn't give the number, but you said you had few responses to the survey, and then only 3 agencies discussing having a wellness manager, and 2 of those 3 are potentially moving forward.
Mhm.
So can you just talk about ongoing efforts to get the agencies to be responsive?
That's always a challenge. You know, Pebb doesn't have any authority necessarily, but we do have, you know, the infrastructure in place. We have staffing. We have, the, you know, Pebb's wellness manager, me, that I connect directly with folks at these large agencies. And everyone, by everyone, I mean each agency does things a little bit differently. Some will elevate their wellness plan to a leadership team or to the HR office to develop, and those are the folks that I have direct contact with. Other agencies delegate their wellness committee and their wellness plan responsibilities to somewhere else within the organization, but each agency has an identified contact for me, and it's just regular check-ins, reaching out by email, talking to someone in the Chief Human Resource Office to make sure that I have the correct identified HR person or the best person, depending on what my question is. It's a little bit different, so I don't know if that answers your question, Siobhan. It's, yeah, it's just kind of all over the board. Wherever I can find a toe in the door and find a person to work with, that's what I do.
Thanks. I mean, it sounds like culture change, right? So we're in the process of culture change around wellness.
And even though agencies may not have responded to my inquiries about, you know, receiving this document or what they may be doing, I don't think that necessarily means they aren't doing anything. I know that one big agency I didn't hear directly from. I kind of heard through the grapevine, but with assurance that things were happening. But I don't think they were quite ready to commit in writing exactly what they were doing. Like they didn't want to say, we have put in our policy option package FTE for wellness, because I think negotiations were still happening. So it will be interesting to see over the next couple of years exactly what is going on at each agency. And I'm happy to provide the board with an update later on once I find out.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, I'm not seeing other questions. All right, well, thank you for this, Teresa.
Thank you.
And we look forward to further conversations. It sounds like it's probably the July meeting, right, Ollie, that will further discuss a strategic plan?
That's correct, Siobhan.
Okay. So I believe we now move on to Canopy. We've got Julie Marshall here with us to talk about our EAP.
Hi, sorry, I had to unmute myself. We're starting a little early, so I'm just gonna, is Umberto, is he on the line right now?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, we can get started. Good morning. We're looking forward to presenting today. When I presented last year, we were still Cascade. So we are now Canopy. Same company, same ownership, just a name change and a branding change that better reflects our company and how our services have evolved. And I want to introduce Umberto Chacon and Shauna Pouladine, both of who work with me now on the management of the Pebb account and will be helping me with the presentation today. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So just a quick look at what we'll be going through today. We'll look at our services, the utilization, I know which Teresa mentioned, promotion of those services. And I know you had some questions about some potential alternative EAP session models. And so we'll look at those as well as, you know, along the way, answer any questions you have and identify any next steps that you'd like to follow up, like us to follow up on. So I'm going to let Umberto start us off here.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Hello, everyone. If we can go to the next slide. Just wanted to show a quick overview of our services. It's a comprehensive set of services for individuals. In addition to coaching, counseling, and 24/7 crisis support, Canopy offers a robust set of work-life referrals and self-help resources to help members with various life events, responsibilities, and goals that they may have, so they can take care of their commitments and feel better and move forward. So next slide. So I just want to show you utilization rate. Last year, state of Oregon had 8.1% utilization. We just count referrals to providers and services in our utilization number. There was actually higher engagement when you include like digital resources and things like that. But this is the utilization number we've traditionally shown. We did show the national average for high service EAPs, which is closer to 5%. And then there are some other EAPs that are closer to 2% or so. So state of Oregon is very robust, utilization. We can go to the next slide.
And just really quickly, I know
Yes, sure.
most of our universities also use Canopy as well, right? Are those numbers you could provide at some point too, so we can see the utilizations of the universities
Of
as
the
well?
universities?
Yes.
Sure, yeah. Take a
Thanks.
note of that. Shauna is our scribe today, so great. So we'll get the university info to you. Whole life directions. So we have a proprietary digital cognitive behavioral therapy tool that assesses users in 9 domains, such as stress, anxiety, depression, and sleep. And it helps them select goals and learn ways to change behavior and address issues. So what we've seen in the users of that, which is nearly 3% of the population, is that the top issues are depression, sleep, and stress. And then the goals that they chose to work on were anxiety, stress, and depression. So it's interesting that anxiety, showed up as one of the top goals, but it's not one of the top issues per se. If we can go to the next slide, that'll give us a little insight into the clients. So we could see pre-pandemic, anxiety was at the 5th top presenting issue, and that was traditionally true, that anxiety was down around 5 or 6. But during the pandemic, anxiety and COVID concerns went up to 1 or 2. And you can see that in the other years in the columns. So anxiety, went up quite a bit at the start of the pandemic. It's starting to wane. We're seeing it go down, and marriage and relationships, which are perennially, the top issue, are coming back to the top. So if we can go to the next slide. So we also wanted to show work-life requests, so those non-counseling requests. Legal has always been number 1, continues to be number 1, even during the pandemic. But something that's interesting here is that resource retrieval in 2021 came up to 3rd. It usually is somewhere down on the list, like 5th. So all sorts of different resource retrievals that we've done. There were wildfires, back in last year, so we did some help with finding programs and resources and things like that. So just interesting to note that. You can go to the next slide, and actually it's Julie's turn. Give it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things, we wanted to talk about a little bit, as you know, and I know you're aware, the provider availability and access for members to mental health care, it's a national crisis in terms of that. And COVID has just increased that. Many providers have retired or left practice, and many have changed to telehealth only. And so while access has always been a priority for us, the last 2 years, it more so has been, because we've had to do that to make sure we maintain that access for the members. We've increased our provider relations staff and also our follow-up protocols and the staff that are dedicated to those procedures to ensure that members are scheduled with a counselor as quickly as possible and don't fall through the cracks. So what happens from the first date that member contacts us through to when we match them with a counselor, we follow up on that case every day until the member has a scheduled appointment. And a lot of that is working with our providers to arrange their availability for that member. So with our providers, we've increased their reimbursement rates. We've worked with them closely to ensure their availability and that access. So that communication with them and that relationship has been very important. So our current average is right now 7 days to first appointment. And that, I want to say too, that's from the date they called to an appointment scheduled. So it's not just that we offered them an appointment within those 7 days, it's that it was an appointment that worked for that member and is scheduled in the calendar. So pre-COVID, that was about 3 to 5 days. So, you know, it's longer than we want, and we're continuing to keep watching that and hopeful that we'll be able to get that to come down as things change. But if we hadn't been doing and haven't been doing our enhanced follow-up in the work we do with our providers, that 7 days would be about 21 to 30 days. And so I also wanted to note this is for routine mental health situations. So for crisis, we provide immediate support. So going to the next slide, as we're talking about access, I want to shift a little and start talking to you. Go back to the next, there you go. And talk to you about our new online services that are going to provide greater ease of access for members. And these are going to be launched, we're real close, and within about 2 months. And so as you'll see, this is the landing page. The whole site is visually changing, but also it's changing how we are going to be able to serve members. So this is the landing page that you see here. And it starts by taking the member through some questions to help them determine what services they might need or that are recommended to them. If they want to go directly to the site or they know what services they want, they can do that. But if not, we really help provide them some guidance. And so now go to the next slide. And it takes them through the series of questions that I mentioned that really is going to start assessing not only what services they need, but what level of distress or acuity is going on for them. And going to the next slide, what's happening behind the scenes is our virtual care navigator. So it's taking that information from the member and really determining based on their need and their requests for services, looking at based on where they land, high through low, what's recommended. So you can see if there's higher needs, they're going to have more intensive services recommended to them, counseling, coaching, the crisis line, all the way through, you know, as you get lower, financial coaching, legal resources, or even the self-guided, like the Whole Life Directions app and those types of things. So go to the next slide. So at the end, when they go through those questions, they receive their plan recommended, which you can see here. And what's really nice here is they can then access those services that are recommended to them all online. Now they can always call us if they want to, but for instance, in this situation, they could click on the financial and schedule a time with a financial coach. So it's very much ease of access. This is saved on their homepage. They can take it again if they want. They can come back later and look at it. And then the other piece that we're excited about that is going to be coming with this is also accessing the counseling online. So if this was recommended or even just a service they are interested in, you can go to the next slide. They are able to search for providers, set up an account, and schedule with the provider. So really that seamless piece, again, just be able to do that all online whenever it's convenient for them. Behind the scenes, our provider specialists are available to help assist them with matching if needed, but they can also do it all online if they would like to as well. Any questions about any of those coming up online or the provider availability?
I just had a comment. I mean, I'm curious whether we have a sense of how many people access mental health care initially through the EAP and then get handed off to the providers, because I know you've talked about the enhanced handoff, and that's something we've talked about on the board before, and the importance of, you know, getting people in when they need to be in. And we do have a crisis around providers in the state. And so just curious about that.
So are you talking about the point at which they're scheduled, or where they continue on beyond the EAP?
Essentially when they're continuing on, and I know it wouldn't necessarily be data you would collect, but if there was a way to assess that, whether we have a larger number of people actually getting their ongoing counseling because they initially assessed it through the EAP, and then
Right.
they get handed off to their provider because they need more sessions. And what the wait time is with the EAP versus trying to get in through their provider initially.
Typically, our wait times from what we've seen have been lower than if they just directly went kind of from a list. That's part of the problem, right? You get a list and then you have to try to figure out who's available. And so when we initially match them with a counselor, we're going to match them with somebody who's also on their insurance whenever possible. So if they do want to continue on from the EAP, it can be a seamless transition right into insurance and they don't need to do that search. So that's one of the benefits, is having them go through us and then they can continue on under the insurance. We do have some data I think we can provide to you later as a follow-up around how many people continue on beyond the EAP. And so we can provide some of that information to you as well. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And maybe it's something on the provider end, because we would have holistic data for the providers, how many people are not getting referred through the EAP, but the total number, and that might get us there.
Yeah. Any other questions on that? And we'll definitely circle back to get you some more of that data that we can. Okay, well, I'm going to now turn it back over to Umberto to continue on.
Thanks, Julie. Next slide.
Yeah.
So in addition to a wide variety of services for individuals, we have services for managers, HR, and the organization to help with training, crisis support following a traumatic or disruptive event, and management and organization development. So, robust set of services for the organization as well. We can go to the next slide. We regularly communicate. So we have a monthly newsletter that goes out to our distribution list about a different service each month, along with promotional flyer and information. We also send out notices about free webinars. And every quarter, we send out a leadership support newsletter. So we do quite a bit to communicate what we have to offer. We know that, you have to constantly promote. And so we very much do that. If we can go to the next slide, you can see, go to the next, yeah.
And if we hold a moment, it looks like Kimberly has a question.
Oh, okay. What's the question?
So I was recently asked, you just mentioned about leadership and kind of resources for leadership. I was asked recently by someone that asked me, what is the plan for Oregon Department of Corrections to really help staff heal from COVID? What is our recovery plan for our staff? And I don't know if that's something that you all are working into your leadership presentations or handouts or those kind of things, but I didn't have a direct answer. So I've been pondering, what does that look like for me and DOC?
Julie or Shauna?
Yeah, well, we have been working with Department of Corrections around just access. Some of on this slide, actually, you'll see some of the promotional materials we put together. So Kimberly, we certainly for leaders have provided a lot of information around COVID and all the different phases that we've had to go through, right? And now we're kind of in that new phase. And so we certainly could partner with you to talk about what the unique needs you'd want and use some of the materials we have, or even develop some trainings if you wanted. So I would think that we could even set up a consultation and talk through kind of what some ideas, and we could talk to you about what other organizations are doing and some recommendations we would have based on that.
Right.
So
do even more to customize some materials, right? Go ahead. Yes, Kimberly.
We do have a wellness, a dedicated wellness manager at DOC. So I would have, like it would be that I would partner that off with her and be happy to participate. But it's good to see that this is an avenue that we could go to because we definitely, there's a lot of healing that needs to happen. due to mandates and everything. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And we partner regularly with different agencies on that. So you can have them contact us and we can work out a plan and make some recommendations. Yeah.
And thanks for your question, Kimberly. And it looks like Dawn put a question in the chat. Does Canopy work with Kaiser counselors?
Yes.
You want to take that?
Well, you want me to take that, Umberto?
Yes, would you? Yeah.
So, there is some transitioning going on for the most part. The history with Kaiser has been because they use their staff counselors, that, there isn't what do I want to say, an overlap in the panel because it's an internal panel with Kaiser employees versus somebody. So we couldn't refer them to an EAP counselor who also is with Kaiser. But more and more, I know that Kaiser has opened that up to different providers. And so we've been working with them on ways to help smooth that transition whenever we can. And we also help members and kind of coach them around how to continue on with Kaiser, and we'll help them with that. But it isn't as easy in terms of that transition from EAP into Kaiser many times.
Thank you. That closed system has some important benefits. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, the closed system has some important benefits, also some things that make it harder to work with. And I know that staffing and workforce has been an issue in behavioral health across the state, not just at Kaiser. It seems to me that I wonder if uptake would be potentially better if employees knew that the EAP would work with counselors who could continue on with them, because I know there's that anxiety about having to switch providers if you are going to call in and get help. Oh, well, if I'm going to connect with a counselor, maybe I should just work through my PCP and my regular insurance and not use the EAP because I don't want to have to switch. I don't think I was aware that the EAP could connect with counselors who take our insurance. So
that's a major piece. You're right. And that's something we work really hard at because it's not as easy because panels shift and sometimes providers don't even know what panel they're on or what it's called. So our provider relations team works quite a bit to allow our intake staff to be able to do that match. So yeah, you're right. I mean, that's an important piece of it, to be able to continue on with that seamless transition, because it's hard if you think you have to switch, especially in today's climate where it's so difficult to find counselors.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. So we just, wanted to show these promotional materials, show you that we can do, occupation or agency specific ones, and we can customize and collaborate on campaigns, but also this, that we're trying to be more visual, less wordy, trying to get attention, because, we know we need, I just have a brief moment to do that. So I just wanted to show you some examples. If we can go to the next slide. Just kind of looking ahead, we have many exciting things on our roadmap, including updating our Canopy app. Also the member hub, as Julie mentioned, with the self-scheduling and the search. Also some leadership micro-trainings, little 1 to few minute videos around various topics that we get calls about from leaders who are looking for a consultation. And then later in the year, we're looking at introducing that updated whole life directions and also a coaching platform. So we're looking to do more around coaching digitally on the platform, on the hub. So we're really excited about that. If we can go to the next slide. So we thought we'd look at what are some gaps, what are some data that tells us about opportunities, and just kind of put them out there, and we can certainly discuss it some here, but then later if there's interest in any of these things. So one of the items is counseling. So we looked at our data as far as the agencies that have the 3-session plans and the 5-session plans, because they can choose between the two. And what we found was that 50% of the cases in the 3-session plans used all of their sessions. And in the 5-session plans, 35% of the cases used all of their sessions. So it's interesting because typically when we see groups at 20 to 30% of their cases using all of the sessions, they start to look at increasing the number of sessions in plan. So there potentially here is an opportunity to increase sessions to maybe 6 or 8. So that's something, we think that would be good to look at, explore if that would be something you all want to do, because there are a significant number of people who are using all the sessions, and who knows just where they're going next. I mean, we have some idea, but
And
Umberto, this is
yes,
Brian
Sean.
Olson, if I may, just to let the
It's not
board
Brian.
know that I suspect that Teresa Mercer and I will be coordinating a recommendation related to this opportunity that will go to the board in the next couple of months. Canopy has been involved in a lot of our PMAC and Worksite Wellness Coordinating Council work the past 3 to 4 months, along with the medical carriers. And out of that work, we're potentially expecting to recommend that the board initiate a renewal process with Canopy that would be effective July 1, 2023, and that could potentially include updating the current service model arrangement.
Thanks for that, Brian. And I was also just going to ask, I mean, it could be either you or Ali, to speak to the current arrangement, because my understanding is it's agency by agency and it's agency dollars that are spent. So if you could remind us of how the process works.
Brian, you want to talk about our 100+ contracts with each agency?
Well, sure. So it is not a core benefit. So EAP benefits under Pebb's plan are voluntary. That said, I believe we have close to 100% participation as far as state agencies. I'll let Julie, speak to that. Canopy, excuse me. Sorry.
That's okay.
They track. We develop the participating program agreements and confirm payment arrangements, but ultimately Canopy tracks those and confirms with participating programs, given that there is an option to participate or not. So, Julie, in terms of participation.
Yeah, I believe we're close to 100%. We have, and then most universities, we do not have OSU, but we have all those agencies, and just like Brian said, they choose at renewal if they want a 3 or a 5 session. And we work with agencies a lot of times. That kind of generates questions from them about what their utilization is and things like that. And so we work with them individually on those as they go through that renewal and that choice.
Yeah, I would just echo what Julie said. They worked with a couple agencies that I know of, and really during some pretty critical times, and were instrumental in helping the agencies get resources and access to the resources they were really needing, and didn't even think the EAP could provide, and Canopy really delivered.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, Siobhan?
No, it sounds like we'll probably just discuss this further in July and get recommendations too. Thanks.
Okay, great.
Yeah, just as a heads up, there will probably be more than just a recommendation related to renewing Canopy with additional service levels. I think the committees are also going to be looking at maybe things Pebb could do to make it easier for agencies when they need some sort of supplemental services that Pebb may not cover in a critical situation. So your two committees are looking at the whole menu of things that we could possibly move forward to you guys in July.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So another thing that we looked at is coaching.
And it looks like we had a question before you continue. Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, what is the question?
No, go ahead. I'll ask at the very end. It's about something different. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So coaching. So we looked at all the cases, and less than 1% of the cases are for coaching, which is interesting because we actually are seeing an increase in the interest in coaching. So we think there's an opportunity to do more promotion around coaching. It's, a less stigmatized way to get support, and possibly increase the number of sessions for coaching. Right now, regardless of whether counseling is at a 3 or a 5 session plan, coaching is at 3 sessions. And so one idea is to, if the number of sessions are increased for counseling, maybe also increase it to match the number on coaching. And like I said, do more promotion of that. We are seeing lots of groups starting to do that, and it seems to be taken very favorably. So we think that that's maybe something that is an opportunity.
One thing I just wanted to comment on that, why this is also an opportunity, is around that access piece. One of the things we know is the people accessing services, if you look at kind of the level of severity, about 75% of those are kind of in that more subclinical prevention type, stress, kind of low-level anxiety, things like that, that can be handled by a coach. And so that can be another way to expand those services, to be able to provide quicker access for those types of services. Whereas the counseling can be used much more for where there's, more clinical type situations that need. So there is an access piece that helps. We use our own team around that, so we're able to schedule those trained coaches. So that was just a comment on that piece.
Yeah,
well.
yeah, it's a great point. Can help all around. Any questions around coaching? No? Okay. And then another item is virtual peer support. So we can provide a convenient way for people to anonymously go into an online peer support group. It's very fast. It's like less than a minute. Basically, someone types in what their struggle is, and then they're matched to a group that's going on right then. It's 24/7. A lot of use like on weekends, Sundays and whatnot. And it's moderated by a professional, and the individual can talk about their issues, receive some support from peers, as well as digital tools from the moderator. So this is something new that we have. It would be, an additional cost, but it is something that we are seeing more and more people go to, just to provide another avenue for people to reach out, get some support, and possibly move forward on some things. So any questions about that?
For both of those, the coaching and the peer support, it also provides kind of another avenue if someone is feeling they're not ready for counseling or feels there's kind of a stigma for counseling. So what we found is it can many times open the door to have people access. And then if they even need a step up in that care up to counseling, they're more willing to do that. So that's been one of the pieces that has helped in terms of utilization.
Okay, and go to the next slide, which is just what questions, if any, do you have?
Do you want to go ahead, Greg?
Yeah, now's when I'll ask mine. So I'm one of those that when we have an app, I fill my phone just to figure out how it works. And I did download the Wellness Direction app. And when I click on Get Started, it basically just tells me that I need an access code. So if I'm an individual that just downloads it to kind of find out or figure out who you are, how do I end up working with that?
So your access code, you can use Pebb or State of Oregon. And so when we've done the promotion of that to members, we put that wherever we can, and so that they're able to access that way. And the reason for that obviously is because your employer has to adopt it, right? But also we can push content that's specific.
So we can match you with your selected employer. We need your access code.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Just something I can throw out there if people are asking, or so when this gets ramped up and gets started, so we know where we're going. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Good
you.
question. Absolutely.
Do we have other questions from board members? All right. Did you have another question, Greg? Nope. Okay. Really appreciate the discussion and the questions. Thank you, Umberto, Julie, and Shauna. And I believe we're at the time in our agenda. We are going to take a 10-minute break. Why don't we come back at 11:05, and I'll put that in the chat.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. All right, welcome back from break, everyone. It looks like we have Mercer here, and we are going to be going over our final rates for the 2023 plan year. And we've got Emery and I believe Andrew and Mitch presenting as well. Am I initially handing it over to you, Emery? Oh, Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew, you can kick us off here.
Got it, thanks.
Made it back just in the nick of time after the 10-minute break. Okay, all right, hi everyone. So as Siobhan said, we've got our final rates to discuss today. Rose, if you want to flip to the next slide. So the final composite rate, final premiums and premium equivalent rates as well for your self-insured plans. We'll review final decisions that were approved last month as well as in the prior months. And then we'll talk about next steps. And so, you know, this is not the juiciest agenda of all time. A lot of this stuff many board members will have already seen, but nonetheless, hang in there with us and just stop us as questions come up. So if we want to move to the next slide, please. So we typically have been kicking off these meetings the last 4 or 5 months or so with these guiding principles, and on the next slide, the health equity strategic pillars. And everyone has sort of heard my spiel on both of these, and these are great decision-making tools. Today is not really a decision-making day; it's more of a review day. And so I think in the interest of time, we can probably jump ahead. The next slide, Rose, is the health equity strategic pillars, which again is a great lens as decisions are being considered. But for today's purposes, I think we can jump ahead to the next slide, which is composite rates. And so for this one, I will hand it off to Emery, who's gonna take us through this final composite rate.
Thank you, Andrew. As Ollie mentioned earlier, the Pebb board did approve a funding assessment to help fund wellness programs and other programs in the prior board meeting. So this slide shows the composite rates for each year, the final composite rate decisions by year. And so at the very bottom, you can see the 2023 decision, which was actually to increase the Pebb admin to 0.9%, and that's the Pebb portion of the admin for staff and other systems, as well as the 1.868% funding assessment. So those two elements together bring the composite rate up to $1,700 and $1,716.98, which is a 3.4% increase over the prior year's composite rate. So that was the final decision. The additional Pebb funding did increase. I guess the amount being put into the Pebb reserve, as well as to pay for the wellness programs, by about $19.1 million. I just want to note that in the rates that we're going to be showing on following slides, we show them prior to the Pebb admin, prior to Pebb to consultant commissions, as well as the funding assessment. So what's shown there is really essentially the I guess the unloaded rates. As we talk about, the final rates will be included in communications, and that's what the contributions are going to be based off of later, but we don't show those actually in this presentation. Any questions? Okay, moving on. So this slide does show some of the final board decisions to get overall about $6.7 million in savings, the bulk of which were provided in the first line above, which is the manufacturer's coupon program for Providence. So that was roughly an $8 million premium impact or savings of $8 million. And the impact in composite was to drop the composite rate by about 0.7%. The Modus site of care did provide some savings as well, about $125,000. Diabetic testing supplies, excluding the coverage, saved a little bit more, about $50,000. And then there were some additional program increases down below there. So for the medically necessary breast reduction surgery, that was included for all the self-funded plans, and it's about $585,000 of additional cost. The DPP, there was no impact on the costs that we included. Orthodontia was increased for the Delta Dental plan, so that was about $470,000. For vision, the frame allowance was increased for Walmart and Sam's Club. And then the retinal mapping, that was included for the Plus plan. And so that's a $10 copay. The additional cost is $390,000. But since that's on the Plus plan and would essentially be covered as part of the premium rates, there's actually no impact on the composite rate for that increase. Moving on. And the final rates and fees. And Andrew, I'm going to toss this back to you.
Sure. Thanks, Emery. And I will also call out that for each of those plan design changes that were approved that Emery just went through, we do have the more detailed descriptions in the appendix if you need to flip through and sort of refresh yourself on any of those, or for that matter, if you want to raise one to discuss again, we're happy to do that. And so for these next slides, we're going to go through the final premiums for your insured coverages and your premium equivalents on your self-insured coverages. And so starting with Kaiser, which is, an insured benefit, we are showing you the final 2023 rates broken out between full-time and part-time folks, as well as hem and non-hem. And so in 2023, these rates are increasing 3.3%. The rates shown here are the HMO. On the next slide, we'll show you the other Kaiser plan. And just to reiterate what Emery said at the outset, these are sort of the unloaded rates, which we've noted there in some of those bullets below the rate tables. And so flipping to the next slide, we'll take a look at the other Kaiser plan. Same increase here, so not a lot to say. We've got the same breakout by different employee types and the hem and non-hem rates as well. And these are all inclusive of any of the approved changes. I guess that sort of goes without say, since these are final rates. Any board approved changes are included in all of these rates and premium equivalents as we're going through. All right, I think we can jump to slide 12, please, Rose. And so for your self-insured coverages, we're going to show you the final ASO fees, which is what this table is, and then we'll also show you the final premium equivalents. And so here on this ASO exhibit, you can see if you look at the, let's see here, the 6th row from the bottom, there's a 0% increase for the MODA ASO fee for the sort of base fee. There is a small increase for MODA 360, which would be the 5th row from the bottom. You can see that's going up by about 15 cents. And so we're showing these ASO fees broken out by all the components, all the different sort of programs that are included in that ASO fee, which you'll see running along that left side column. But you'll note between 2022, 2023 best and final, those fee components are all held flat, again, with the exception of the MODA 360. And so on the next slide, we're showing Emery takes those final administrative fees, applies trend, does his other sort of underwriting magic to come out with these accrual rates or premium equivalent rates. And so for MODA in 2023, these are increasing by a little bit more than 5%. They're coming in at 5.4%. Based on the latest months of experience data that Emery's included in his projection. Any questions on how we arrive at these premium equivalents? What's included in them? Anything along those lines we can discuss? Alrighty, I think Rose, if you want to jump to the next slide, please. So now we'll do the same sort of 1-2 in terms of slides, but with Providence. And so on this first one, we're just looking at the ASO fee, the administrative fee, broken out by statewide and choice. We've got similarly the components of the administrative contract on the left there in terms of what all is included, utilization management, nurse line, et cetera. And you can see if you compare 2022 against 2023, those are all held flat. And so a 0% increase in 2023 for the ASO fees for Providence for both statewide and for choice. right, and so let's jump to the next slide, please. And so again, this is the premium equivalent rates for the Providence plans. There is a slight difference in the rate increase for 2023 for statewide versus choice. Statewide is coming in a little bit lower of an increase at 1.5% versus the choice 3.3% increase for 2023. Historically, the choice trend has been lower than statewide. You know, not the case with 2023 in terms of total increase. But yes, Ali, I see you have a question.
Yeah, just just wanted to ask, since we're almost into June, halfway through 2022, have you seen the bounce back, you know, that we're all expecting yet in this year?
Emery, do you want?
Yeah, sure, I can handle that. In terms of the bounce back, at least I think really early we did not. I think there was it's not as big as I guess what everyone's expecting. Although I think there has been some notifications of some larger claims for some of the Providence plans. At least recently that we haven't really incorporated. But in terms of like a big bounce back in cost, no, we have not seen that.
Thank you.
And I just have a question. This has to do with the lowest cost plans for the universities. Specifically, because these rates are showing employee plus, you know, all the different tiers. Is it right that Kaiser deductible is now the least cost plan and then it's Providence Choice and then MODA, or can you just go over that too?
Yes, I believe you're right, Siobhan, that Kaiser deductible is still, I guess, the lowest cost plan, especially as it relates to the university systems. But yes, Kaiser deductible is the lowest cost plan, and then Providence is now lower cost than MODA.
Okay, thank you. And so that was a switch between MODA and Providence Choice then?
Yes, it was different last year. Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to shift gears to dental and vision. If you thought the medical rates were exciting, just wait until we get to these. Just a little tongue in cheek. Slide 17 here, we're showing Kaiser Dental. No increase in 2023, so these rates will be held flat. If we want to advance to the next slide, Willamette Dental Group had some favorable utilization and experience, and so there's actually a rate decrease on this one. This is a premium rate as it is a fully insured benefit, and those rates in 2023 will go down by 2.5% roughly. All right, on the next slide, we're looking at Delta Dental of Oregon, which is self-insured, which is why we're showing that administrative fee up top with a little bit of an increase. But overall, when we actually do our cost projection to arrive at 2023 rates, there is a decrease of 0.5 point. So similar to Willamette, you know, favorable utilization and experience driving that cost reduction that we're seeing in 23. And then on the final slide of this section is your self-insured vision plan. So these are held flat for that table in the top part of the slide. For the base plan, we are projecting a 4% decrease for the base plan and a 2.1% increase for the plus plan, which is on the right. And so the plus plan is the plan where the board approved to adjust the copay on the retinal mapping. Any questions so far on any of that, or all pretty straightforward? Okay. All right. Well, that sort of wraps up the rates. I know we went through that really quickly, but let's talk about next steps a little bit. And so our understanding is that there will not be a June board meeting since rates have been finalized at this point. But now that, you know, all decisions have been approved as it relates to renewals by the board, and so Mercer and staff and others are already actively working on, you know, rolling these out with the carriers. There's been a couple of threads on the diabetes prevention programs, and so all that work is underway. We do have the contracts and handbooks on our radar. Apologies for the typo. That should say for the 2023 plan year in that third sub bullet. And then when we next get together in July, we will be doing our utilization report, which Emery and others are working on right now as we speak, as well as an update on the risk-based capital reporting. So I guess let me pause there and see if there are any comments or questions from anyone.
I just want to make a comment. Just appreciate everyone's focus and all of our providers too for getting us the information so that we could come to our final rates by the May meeting. And I know the board looked at all of the changes and we went through a lot of motions at the last meeting, and that puts us at a place that we can move forward at this meeting with the 2023 rates. And do we have any other questions or comments?
Siobhan, are we going to do one motion to accept as presented, or I know in past years we've broken some stuff up, but
sure. So we actually received direction from Ali before the meeting that these are the rates that because we made all of our motions and adopted at the last meeting what the changes were. We actually don't need to vote on the rates. This is the outcome of the decisions that we made a month ago. So we actually don't need to take a vote this meeting.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Looks like we got all our questions answered a month ago. Thank you both.
Sure thing.
All right. So I believe our last agenda item this morning, we have an innovation work group update. I'm not sure if Sean is still on, if he's planning to do that, or whether Margaret is going to be sharing with us this morning.
I think that Ali is.
Oh, got it. Thanks, Sean.
A few items just because Margaret had to step out, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. We've got a pretty busy agenda at this afternoon's IWG meeting. The work group will be reviewing carriers' value-based payment levels as of 2020 data. And we'll hear updates from our carriers with particular focus on how VBP adoption is tracking against the targets that were established in the VBP Compact. You might remember those as 35% under advanced VBP by 2021, 50% by 2022, 60% by 2023, and 70% by 2024. And the meeting will also include an update on the cost growth target program, including plan accountability structures under the program. So we're looking forward to hearing from that program manager. Let's see, we're also including a review of our behavioral health network adequacy review, the goal of identifying potential reporting and contract refinements to enhance access monitoring, topic of discussion this morning. Also ongoing work on the Centers of Excellence program, the goal of having recommendations for board consideration in the fall. And lastly, just talking about additional work planned in 2022, including updated hospital cap audit and savings analysis based on 2021 utilization, and then further price analysis using price transparency data carriers reporting to Pebb and OWEB in early fall. So a lot going on. with the innovation work group. As you know, we like to have one actionable topic, one kind of ongoing topic for the next renewal, and then one topic for long-term strategic planning. And so the innovation work group continues to move a lot of work forward. That's really about it.
Thanks, Ollie. Do folks have questions for Ollie about the innovations work group? All right, Kimberly. Yes.
Can I wanted to bring something up that we'd all gotten in an email. It's the WebMD Health.
Sure.
I haven't seen any of your names on the challenges that we're adding our data to the challenges that there's a little this month's challenge. But I just wanted to tell people that this is super easy to upload the WebMD Health, that the email came out to all the Pebb employees, and you can go to the App Store and then you put in Pebb as your identifier, and for connecting, it's free, it's all good. But it is kind of fun. There is, I'm not a super worker, like workouter person. I don't know how to say that. Like, I'm not like I don't have thousands of hours of working out. The challenge for this month is 600. I have my 600, but you'd have to do it 21 days. So you can't just do it like in, first week and then you're done. But there are some great like DOC employees that are kicking butt, taking names, and that are in the thousands. But I didn't realize you could do a code name. I just put my name in there so you guys can see exactly where I am. Some people have really fun code names in this app, but again, you guys know I love Healthy Team, Healthy You. This is a Healthy You product, and I think it's important for us to try it, use it, be able to talk to our staff about it, and promote it because, again, it's free and it just motivates you. And cleaning your house and doing yard work count. So, hey, I'm good. Like walking counts and all that other great exercise counts. But again, me, Healthy You, I got to promote it because I love the program. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. So it sounds like you want some healthy competition on the Pebb board, right? And some leadership figure. All right, thank you. Appreciate that. And any other comments before we turn to public comment or questions? Anything else anyone wants to share? All right, Rose, do we have any public comment today?
No, you don't have any public comment.
All right, so we are actually going to adjourn quite early. Thanks, everyone. And again, we do not have a June meeting. We will see all of you in July. Thanks so much.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.